Welcome to Citizen University TV. I'm Eric Liu. This season on the show, we're talking about a bunch of strategies of civic power, ways that you can change the game, change the story, and change the equation of power in civic life. Today in particular, we're going to focus on one strategy that we call attacking the plan. Let me say what I mean about that. Attacking your opponent's plan is different from actually attacking your opponent. It is recognizing that at the heart of trying to change the game in civic power is understanding what is the strategy the adversary has at the heart of their action and operation, and how can you undermine that strategy? How can you attack it? There are three ways for us to really examine this notion of attacking your opponent's strategy: to paralyze it, to bypass it, and to undermine it. I want to say a word about each one of these here. Let's start with paralyzing the opponent's plan. Now, in most situations in politics or in civic life, if one side has overwhelming numbers and overwhelming force, they're just going to do a battle of attrition. They're just going to grind down and wear down their smaller adversary and opponent here. And that is actually how things happen in politics a lot. But if you're on this side, if you're in this part of the equation where you're the smaller force, you can't win a game of attrition. You can't win a game of just trying to go pound for pound against the superior force. You've got to figure out ways to counterbalance that. And the first one we're talking about is to use your power here creatively to paralyze, to freeze the motion and the activity of this group, this overwhelming force over here. Let's talk about this concretely. So one of the most important ways that we've seen in recent years a smaller force actually paralyze the opponent by attacking their plan has been Wikileaks. You may like or not like what Wikileaks has done, but over the last few years, both even before the presidential election and a bunch of issues having to do with surveillance and the NSA, Wikileaks was able to take the conventional wisdom of the national security state, this conventional wisdom that said, we have the secrets, we will do surveillance, we do this in the name of security, and they were able to paralyze that entire national security establishment, both in the United States and globally, by using their technology to leak information and to embarrass and to put into the light of day some of the strategies and tactics of the national security establishment. WikiLeaks was really effective at paralyzing and has changed fundamentally the game of our debates about national security and surveillance. In a different way, actually, the issue of preemption in state legislatures. What we have in states all around the country right now are progressive cities enacting legislation to raise the minimum wage or create family leave or create responsible restrictions on gun purchases. And what you have around the country is conservative state legislatures saying, we don't like that. We see that we're outnumbered by a lot of these little cities trying to do these little progressive things, but we're going to actually freeze that action. We're going to paralyze it by passing preemptive laws that prevent cities from doing things on their own. Again, you may like or not like what's happening here, but the fact is that these conservative state legislatures around the country have been effective using preemption legislation at paralyzing the opponent's plan. That brings us to the second notion, which is to bypass. What does it mean to bypass? Well, it's very simple. When you, again, encounter an obstacle in civic life where the opponent, the adversary, has some kind of structural advantage, then it doesn't make sense to try to go head on against it. It makes sense to try to bypass that. And one of the most basic ways we've seen in recent times is actually in presidential politics. Donald Trump, again, whatever else you may think of him, was incredibly effective at bypassing a Republican Party establishment. He was incredibly effective using this medium right here of Twitter at bypassing the establishment media and the ways in which people were conferring notions of electability and seriousness and so forth. He was able to use this medium to speak directly to millions of disaffected Americans and thereby attain his electoral victory. The same was true actually of Bernie Sanders, who came into his presidential election without the advantages of money, without the advantages of force, without the advantages of reputation that Hillary Clinton had in the Democratic primary, but he was able to bypass that Democratic Party establishment. Indeed, the DNC itself, which was in many ways predisposed to favor Hillary Clinton. And what Bernie Sanders was so skillful at doing during his campaign was activating millions of individual Americans who hadn't participated particularly in presidential politics and saying, we're not going to go toe-to-toe and try to max out on massive donations. We just want your little donations, your $27 donations. We want a whole sea of little donations that allow us to bypass this party establishment. Here in our own state in Washington, a more recent example that I had a chance to be involved in was this one. The Alliance for Gun Responsibility, which is a group of citizens that I was part of at the beginning, has pushed successfully now twice in Washington state against a recalcitrant state legislature that did not want to enact common sense gun reforms. And what this organization did was say, okay, if the legislature is going to be bottled up, if the gun lobby is really effective at controlling a few members of the state legislature, then this group of citizens will bypass the legislature and go straight to the people. And going to the people through ballot measures, 1491 most recently, creating extreme risk protection orders, and a couple of years ago, Initiative 594, creating universal background checks for gun purchases. These are classic examples of bypass and attacking your opponent's plan by going around it. So the third way in which we think about attacking the opponent's plan is simply undermining it, foot dragging, sabotage, what you might think of simply as resistance to the dominant authority. And this notion of undermining takes a variety of forms here. Right now, actually, throughout the federal government, you're seeing these kinds of alt social media accounts spring up by rogue employees who are resisting the agenda of the Trump administration and saying, hey, here we are in NASA or the Forest Service or the EPA, and we are here to tell you what's going on, here to tell you what they're trying to plan, and here to tell you that the official line isn't really true. Now, this is a fascinating thing made possible in part by the social media technologies of our time, but this impulse to resist against dominant authority is one that is an age-old strategy of citizen power. Another form of this kind of undermining is what we're seeing all around the country right now, these staged protests. This is a die-in here, and they've been staged in the wake of police shootings, more recently in the wake of the House enactment of Trump Care. And the notion is we're not just going to protest, we're actually going to physically block any notion that this thing can roll forward. We're going to physically demonstrate in these die-ins the ways in which these are morally bankrupt proposals that are being put out there. Again, you may disagree or agree with the point of view being expressed here, but what's being embodied here is an undermining of a dominant moral authority. The same is true in this third picture here, which actually seems pretty boring and unremarkable. A group of people wearing t-shirts and jeans walking down the street in mixed company. But what's notable about this picture is it's taken in Iran. And these young people, simply by walking down the street this way, are indeed embodying an act of resistance. They're saying, we're going to be in Western dress. We're going to be in mixed company. We're going to live in a spirit of fun. And all of these things push against the dominant notion in Iran of a moral way of being, a set of strictures about how one is supposed to behave in public and in private. All of these forms of undermining activate different notions of citizen power. Sometimes they're really intentional and coordinated. Sometimes, as in Iran, there's no central plan. It's just young people contagiously setting a fad of fun. But whether it's coordinated or uncoordinated, this approach of undermining is an important part of attacking your opponent's plan. So, in thinking about how we attack our opponent's plan, let's bring this home now to Seattle. And we've got a case study here about a movement that's been burgeoning called Indivisible. Let's take a closer look.